All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So, last time we left off with basically the mess that was the Articles of Confederation. And because of the issues that a lot of people in these state governments are seeing, like some of the key players like, Jefferson, Washington, Adams, Madison, Hamilton, a lot of these types of guys, they're going to come together and they are going to have a convention in Annapolis, 1786, representatives from 12 states. Well, that's actually the next one. So this one, 5 states representatives are going to be showing up, and they basically want to discuss the limits that there are on trade and commerce between the states. And as they are trying to figure this all out, it basically shifts to be like, this government system, the articles is junk. So what we're going to do is we're going to call for a Congress. We'll have the Congress call a meeting in Philadelphia to basically figure out what to do next. So the Philadelphia Convention, we're going to have 55 delegates from 12 states. Rhode Island refused to be a part of this uh, because Rhode Island is the smallest state, and they liked the articles because they had equal power to states like New York and Virginia, who had much, much larger populations compared to the teeny tiny population of Rhode Island. So, yeah, they didn't want to change, the status quo. Now, what we're going to be seeing here for the representatives of these 12 states, everybody but Rhode Island, they're not your typical Americans. Most of them they're white, college educated. A lot of them were lawyers, judges, people who had legal backgrounds. George Washington is chosen to preside over the convention, mostly because he brings a certain air about him, because he is someone who the people look up to and they basically worship the ground he walks on. So if he is giving his support to this convention and what their goal is of, trying to come up with a new government idea, it carries a lot of weight. Now, so something that's going to happen with this convention is they're quickly going to agree on a government that has 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. And, you know, then we're going to have some disputes that come up, such as one over representation, how people are going to be represented in the government, and slavery. All right, those are 2 key issues. Now, first one, representation. We have 2 plans, the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. The Virginia plan proposed by James Madison favors large states, based on population, having 2 houses of legislature. And we're going to have the New Jersey plan, which is, and bicameral, I mean 2 houses, like how we have a bicameral now, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The New Jersey plan was proposed by this guy Patterson. It's in favor of small states, so Rhode Island would like this. 1 vote per state plus a unicameral legislation, which would be like, the Senate, because it's equal numbers in there, 2 per state in the Senate. Now, this is called the Great Compromise on how we figure it out. It's also called the Connecticut Plan. So what we're going to have is a bicameral legislation, 2 houses, the House of Representatives based on the state's population in favor of small states, and the Senate, where each state gets 2 representatives regardless of the state's population. It's good for the small states. All right, issue number 2, slavery. Should there be slavery? And if yes, how should slaves be counted for purposes of taxation and representation in the government, such as the House of Representatives? All right. Yes, there would still be slavery. And now we have differing opinions on how representation is going to happen. In the North, slaves are property they have no rights and can't vote. That's their definition in the North. So don't count them for representation because it's not like they have legal rights anyway. All right. Counting slaves for taxation purposes will increase tax revenues from the South, but count them for taxation. Okay. In the South, counting slaves would increase their population, give them more representatives in the House. So they wanted them counted, and they did not want them counted for taxation purposes. So what do we do here? Pretty sticky situation, the arguments on each side. What we get is the 3/5 compromise, and that is each slave will be counted as 3/5 of a person, or you only count 3 out of every 5 slaves for the purpose of determining the state's level of taxation and representation. All right. 3/5 of the slave population is counted. Now, issue number 3, control of trade. North versus South, once again. The North wants central government to regulate interstate commerce and foreign trade, and in the South, they're afraid of the taxes of selling their goods overseas and that it would be placed on their crops, so they'd have to pay that bill. So we're going to have what's called a commercial compromise, where Congress can regulate interstate commerce but cannot tax exports. All right. They're going to basically keep the prices level throughout the country, and they're not going to tax people for sending their goods outside of their state. So it kind of keeps the cost down for the producers of the South. All right, we have issue number 4, presidential power. All right, how long should they serve? So we get the 4-year term. All right, but there's no limit to re-elections at that time. That doesn't happen until the mid-1900s. All right, how much power should the president have? All right, a decent amount of power, including the veto, where they can basically hey, Congress is trying to pass this law. I don't like it. Bye-bye. They can sign a veto on it and, it's gone. How should the president be elected? Delegates, they don't trust the people fully, so they use the Electoral College system, a process that we still have in our elections now. Now, before I go any further, the Electoral College system, for those of you who are not sure how it works, this is basically how it works. So each state has its own different individual number of representatives in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. You combine those two numbers together, and then you get the total number of electoral votes each state has. So, for example, California has 55 electoral votes. So they have 53 members in the House of Representatives and 2 members in the Senate. That's how you get your 55. That's how many votes they get in a presidential election. Now, those 55 votes are basically given to 55 appointed people for casting the ballot. And you never know who it's going to be from a presidential election to presidential election. It could be different people every time. But the way that these 55 individuals will vote is based on basically the popular vote of that state. Okay? So California, at least in more recent years, they have been voting Democrat. So, the majority of the people in California are voting Democrat. So therefore, to show, solidarity with the majority of the people, the electoral college voters of that state will vote Democrat. So there are 55 votes then in the electoral college to the Democrats' nominee. All right, that is how it works. And that's a state-by-state basis. Okay, moving forward. Now we have the Constitution, 1787. Now we are going to, this is the document that we have for our government now. So sovereignty. Who has ultimate power, the state governments or the national government? The Constitution says neither. The power rests with the people, popular sovereignty. The majority rules. So, federalism is going to develop from this, where state and national governments are going to share the powers that the people give them. Powers of the federal government are taxation, regulating commerce, controlling the currency of the country, and passing necessary and proper laws. So, laws that make sense that keep people safe. All right. A problem of concentrated authority is many people thought that a republic, which is what our system is, a republic system, not a democratic system, it is a republic, representatives, could only work in most if most power is with the states, but our solution to this problem is the separation of powers and checks and balances. All right, and checks and balances, that comes into play with the three branches of government, our separation of powers. So we have the legislative branch, which is Congress, the House, and the Senate. We have the executive branch, which is the president and VP. And then we have judicial, which is the Supreme Court. They all are even with each other power wise. And this is able to happen because they basically can't do something without the other one approving it or denying it. So it keeps everything level. All right. Go ahead and take a look at this chart. This basically explains things. Okay. So, fear of the mob, tyranny of the people. So, the founding fathers did not trust the people. So, like the common folk, like us. Uh, and so they deliberately set the Constitution to limit the power of the people as well, such as having the Electoral College system. And senators, at least at this time, were not directly elected by the people. They were actually appointed to their positions. But the people could elect the members of the House of Representatives, and those reps only served 2-year terms. All right, that is where we're going to leave off today. When we come back, we'll be diving even further into our talks on the U.S. Constitution.